Hi, my name is Cyril Zaidan. I work as a program manager at Sanofi. I'll speak about how PMOs can easily define and prioritize which projects go into their pipelines using MIT Sull simple rules approach. So, which projects should you prioritize in your ever-expanding portfolio, and how? So, business today is characterized by relentless change on a global scale. I'm sure you're all familiar with the VUCA notion: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, right? Nothing new here. At the same time, intra-corporation entrepreneurship results in sprawling portfolios of projects, or as our friend today, this morning at the keynote said, chaos, right? You have a lot of projects going on in the company, everybody's taking initiatives, it's called intra-corporation entrepreneurship, and that's a good thing. But at the same time, it can be very challenging. So the outcome of it all is that resources are diluted, employees are snow under, or are drowning, as the picture here shows, or at least this is how I felt when I was given the mission to prioritize a big portfolio of strategic projects. So I'm very happy to share with you today how we actually did that, and I'm going to show you a couple of examples. So I was facing a huge mountain. So I work in a company called Sanofi. It's a global biopharmaceutical company present in more than 100 countries. Generates 30 billion euros a year. So I'm not going to make the conversion now. Don't challenge me on that. Oh, and it has more than 100,000 employees. So you can imagine the amount of projects we had to prioritize. So this was a great mountain to climb, a great challenge, of course, for me, but also something very scary. Honestly, I had no idea how to do it. Our project management office was just set up. We were two. So obviously, we all know the return on investment, ROI, NPV techniques, or I wrote a new one that I heard this morning. You've all seen the algorithm that Bob Safian presented. So this was not an option. I'm not a computer scientist, so I couldn't develop a complicated algorithm to see which projects we should prioritize. So I did some research and stumbled upon the simple rules approach. The simple rules approach is a book. You have all the sources at the end of this presentation. It's a book. It's a couple of Harvard Business Review articles. It's written by MIT's Donald Sull and Kathleen Eisenhardt from Stanford University. It's in a way, it's a simple way of solving complex problems. And this is exactly what I needed. So I made some research and I said, okay, how can I apply this to prioritizing my portfolio of projects? And what better way to explain simple rules than by using simple rules? Rule number one for simple rules is that simple rules are simple. What we mean by that is that there should only be a few, between 2 and 5 tops. Let's take an example. I'm a vegetarian and I want to eat healthy. If I should come up with 3 simple rules, those would be 1, no processed food, 2, plant-based regime, or that's a French word, sorry. And 3, not too much, because I want to stay healthy. Any vegetarians here? No? Okay. Anyone interested in eating healthy? Come on. Okay, great. So that's the first rule. The second rule is simple rules are unique. This means that your rules are not my rules. Let's take the same example. I'm a vegetarian and I want to eat healthy, but I'm an athlete. Then my simple rule 1 would be no processed food, same as the first one. Number 2 would be plant-based. Number 3 would not be do not eat too much, but it would be high protein, right? See where I'm going? Rule number 3 is simple rules relate to a defined activity. What we mean by that is that they're not general concepts or big words and sentences. I did not say, as a set of simple rules, eat healthy and eat vegetarian. That's too high level and that doesn't go into detail enough. Okay, so now let me show you how we applied simple rules to prioritize a big portfolio of strategic projects. Let me first start by the problem we were trying to solve. I'm sure many of you here can relate to that if you're in a PMO. We had a lot of projects with very limited resources, nothing new, And all of those resources were diluted. So we were doing a lot, but the question was, were we doing the right things? Now, to this problem, we came up with 4 simple rules. The first one, and I'm sure this is also very common knowledge here, the first one is projects shall serve the strategic roadmap. And this is number 1, because if they do not, then there's no need in doing it at all, right? Rule number 2 is that projects shall follow a strong discipline to reach execution excellence. Because again, if it does not, it will most likely never deliver anything. Rule number 3 was projects shall provide clearly valued and time-bound positive impacts. Again, if it does not, there's most likely no point in doing it at all. And final rule number 4 was same as the one above. We're talking about impact, so outputs. The rule number 4 was about inputs. Projects shall have clearly valued and time-bound costs. Why? Because if they do not, it will most likely become a resource sink. The outcome of, so I just want to, I love challenging myself and to see if you guys were following. When I explained what simple rules are, the second rule to explain simple rules was to say that simple rules are unique. Well, I have a different perception on this simple rule when I look at this set of simple rules to prioritize a portfolio of projects, because I think these are quite universal. We all look at projects that serve the strategy, have a good discipline to reach execution, have timely and valued impacts, so inputs and outputs. I'm sure you all agree that these could easily be replicated in your companies. I see some heads nodding, so happy about that. Okay, so now let me guide you through the process of how we went through it. The outcome was 4 categories of projects. Projects to focus on. These are projects that answered the 4 rules that we've seen before. The other category of projects was what we call projects to accelerate. These were projects that had some executional deficits, but were answering the 3 other rules. The third category were projects to consolidate. This was a big surprise, but not that big of a surprise, is that we found a lot of projects that were actually redundant or highly related that we had to connect and consolidate for a bigger impact. You can imagine in a company of in 100 countries with 100,000 employees, 5 business units, 13 global functions, you might have projects that are actually redundant or very highly connected. And the final one, which is the one that hurt the most, I didn't make many friends with that one, were projects to terminate, meaning that they didn't answer any of the 4 rules. Now, let me take you through the process of how we actually did it. So we went through 3 runs, so what I called runs, so run A, B, and C. Run A was about making and creating the basic inventory. What comes in to this portfolio review? What are we going to look into? Run B was about testing for strategic fit and executional excellence. So rules 1 and 2, because these, if you don't pass those, there's no need for you to stay in the run and be tested for the other rules. And run C was about testing for positive impacts at acceptable costs. Now, run A is highly critical. This is a place where you want to define what a project is, because you'll see in a couple of slides that we had a couple of surprises on projects that weren't really projects. This is a place where you want to define what a project is, and you also want to scope what goes into this review. To give you a couple of examples, we took only projects. I'm just citing a couple of criteria we took. We took only projects that were more than 6 months long, that were at least over 2 business units or 2 global functions, and that were not country specific other than the big 5. So in our company, these would be the US, China, etc. These are examples. And we said we did not take all R&D projects. So in pharma, R&D projects have a very, I mean, this is the essence of what we do in our companies. So they have a very clear and strong governance. So we said, okay, let's leave them out. There's no use of asking questions and you know, creating extra work, because yeah, we also have to want to keep this in mind. Now, to test all of these projects, for each of the rules, we asked questions and proof points. This is something that is very dear to my heart. If you want to answer a question, prove it. So I'll give you a couple of examples. And this turned out to be not so easy when we did the exercise. I'll show you how. Now, let's go into the examples. So we're in run B, so we're testing for rules number 1 and 2, so testing for strategic fit and executional excellence. So you see the 2 questions we have here. An example of questions we asked for the first rule was, does your project serve the strategic roadmap of the company? That is something known to all of our employees. Yes, no. Prove it. Explain how the output of this project is going to serve the strategic roadmap. And we realized that this was really a tough question to answer. And you'll see when I show the results that not so many projects really got a hold of this. An example of questions and proof points for the second rule was, what are the objectives of the project? What are your 6 critical milestones? How is the team incentivized? Key question. And of course, for all of these questions, again, proof points. Now, the second run, or third run actually, so run C, where we were testing for positive impacts at acceptable cost. An example of rule number 3 was to say, okay, what are the tangible impacts and the intangible impacts of your project? And here, the proof point was the hardest to get. Prove that by doing your project, you're actually going to get the outputs that you're saying we're going to get. You know, we've all seen projects on project starters when presenting to get a budget saying, yeah, I'm going to come up with 200 million savings. The margins are going to go up by X%. This is going to have X% impact on sales. Okay, prove it. And this proving exercise turned out to be very challenging for the project leaders, and they hated it for us, obviously. An example of questions and proof points we asked for simple rule number 4 was, for each of the milestones that are valued in time, what are the costs, both from a money perspective, but also from an FTE perspective? And into these critical milestones, we didn't ask for a global cost and for a global FTE resource consumption. Yeah, sure. How did? Well, I'll get to that. That's an excellent question because I'm just gonna. It's the following slide. A key component was to keeping this exercise agile and simple. We're using simple rules to prioritize a complicated portfolio of projects. So it was key for us to be simple and agile. So for each of the rules, as I showed you, we had like 2 or 3 question stops. And after we done the first run or the second run, we had feedback loops or feedback areas where project leaders could give us feedback on how clear is the question, how hard is the question, is it relevant, is it not. So we adapted a lot our questionnaire and how we asked the question. And also we gave a lot of support to project leaders that were not used to answering these types of challenging questions, that were in a way a mirror of a project charter, but that were going deeper into really questioning your project. And to be very honest, so I was running this with my boss at the time, and I was also given a project to deliver on. And my boss was like, okay, so your project is not in the scope, but you're going to get it in just to test it. And it's actually pretty hard to prove. And by prove, I mean proving as in you have proof that your project is going to deliver on these promised costs, impacts, outputs, whatever. It was actually really challenging, but it's key to keep the dialogue open and keep this feedback loop and the agility of changing the set of questions that were underneath those 4. I hope that answers his question. Okay, great. So now let's look at the results. Results. So we had a total of 93 projects to prioritize. You can imagine there, of which we knew of, right? Because we had, I'm sure that we had a lot more. We had 20 projects that ended up in the projects to focus on category, meaning that those passed the 4 simple rules. We had 13 that needed to be accelerated, so that had executional deficits. 11, that's a really high number that needed to be consolidated, but if I have some friends here that are in big companies, I'm sure this is not a surprise for you. Hence the importance of having a PMO that is integrated in the strategic exercise beforehand. and 9 projects to terminate. As I said earlier, this is where I made a lot of friends. Now, I'm seeing some dazzled faces, mental calculations going on. Yes, we're missing a couple. We had 40 projects that didn't end up in these 4 categories. Why? 18 of them were closed or actually out of scope, but the project leader pushed them through, and we said, but they're not in scope, so we had to remove them afterwards. And 22 were what we called business as usual. What I mean by business as usual, you remember I said it's very important to define what a project is, because to us, project leaders is clear. But as our friend this morning was saying, everything can be a project. A movie in Hollywood is a project. So what is a project? You know, we took obviously I'm doing a product placement here, but we took the PMI definition to define a project. But still, with that, we had 22 projects, of which the outcome was a new policy or a new process, which in our definition of a project did not really get into the definition of what a project for us meant. Yeah, sure. Yep. What is the operational definition of what do you mean by projects to accelerate? So projects to accelerate, we had the 4 simple rules. Projects to accelerate were projects that had executional deficits. By executional deficits, we mean that either the objective wasn't really crisp or clear, or the proof point behind it wasn't strong enough, or the milestoning plan was washy-washy, or a couple of elements, or the team that Yeah, I'll take. Is it working? Here. Okay, I'll take this one. Oldie but a goodie, but not very long. Okay. I hope I'm not killing someone behind. Thanks, Darcia. Thank you. Yeah, so executional deficits. And yeah, we were very surprised to see, for example, that the incentives, I don't know if it's the same in your companies, but we're incentivized on annual objectives that are not always, that are most of the time functional or siloed into where you're nested in the organization. And this was a big thing for us on what an executional deficit would be, because if the team you have someone from IT, from HR, from the business that are not incentivized the same way on this project, it will most likely not deliver. Right. So these are the types of elements we identified as executional deficits.
Definition, doesn't it fit under one of the other categories? So once you are able to define and tie a key objective or something like that, then wouldn't it fit under either projects to focus or projects to terminate or consolidate?
Exactly. No, that's it. Okay. I got your point now. So exactly, these 13 projects, the idea was not just to say, okay, you need to accelerate them, goodbye, but was to take them into our arms and help the project leaders to shift them either into the focus category, either into the terminate category, right? Because if we really think it's not gonna end up well, let's just terminate it. It's very hard to do it, but sometimes you have to. Okay, yeah, I see. Okay. So let's recap now. Key ingredients to have a successful prioritization of your portfolio using the simple rules approach is finding the right simple rules. It can seem very, very easy when you look at simple rules, but actually we really need to think them through and spend time on defining what are the strongest elements that will make a shift in the decision I will make. Number 2, it's very important to explain why you're doing this to the teams, because as a project leader, I'm a project leader. When corporate asks me to to answer questions and fill in questionnaires and whatever, I'm like, again, I already did it like 2 weeks ago for my manager to say where the project's going. So it's very important to say that this review that we're doing is going to take off weight of you as a project leader who is handing 15 projects and is only going to end up handing maybe 9 or 11. So you're going to deliver better, and you're gonna have your time at work will be more impactful in a way. It's very important also to get endorsement from the top. So we were endorsed by the executive committee to run this portfolio review. If not, because if it's not, then people will say, "Who are you and why are you asking me?" Especially when the PMO is new and has just been set into the company. Again, I underline it, defining what a project is to you. It might not be the same for me or for you in your company, but it's very important to really define what a project is and what is the scope you want to look into. And finally, keep it simple and agile, meaning stay adaptable to changes that you want to make, to make this review as easy as possible for the project leaders that are answering the questions. Now, this was a summary of how I implemented the simple rules approach to prioritize a portfolio of projects. I was sitting with, I see faces of some friends I was sitting with at lunch, and as I said, simple rules literally changed my life and how I do things every day now. So I really wanted to dedicate a small slot of my time today, of my presentation, to show you how I use simple rules in my project team. After I've done this review and said, okay, this could work actually in so many different areas, either it's in your day-to-day or in your project team. So I would really like to share this with you, hoping that you will find some elements you can take back home. Okay, so bear with me now. It's 8 a.m. in the morning, or 9 a.m. in Paris because we start later. You still didn't have your coffee. You have 250 emails to read, a calendar that's full with very meaningful meetings. You know the things are going to come out of them. You can use simple rules to actually prioritize or your tasks or your work that day. But again, I'm not going to give you examples because your rules are not necessarily my rules. But it's really powerful to spend a couple of maybe 30 minutes on it just once and say, what are the rules of how you're going to prioritize your day to day. To me, it was what is that is bringing the most value to me, to my team, and to the company. What is the most urgent thing? And third, what is the most fun for me to do? Because I wanted to start my day with something positive, but it can be different. Some people like starting with the hard stuff and then moving on to the next. But let me show you now how I use simple rules in my project team. And actually, there's a strong connection to what we heard this morning. It was literally music to my ears. That we're going into this chaos world, a world that is very project driven, or as I like calling it, purpose driven. I was in a project I was leading with 7 team members. We had a strong purpose, so a common purpose that put us together. And we said, okay, so let's have a frame of simple rules of how we operate. So it said, I am in power. This means I choose what I want to work on as a project member. I bring my expertise and my skills, what I am good at, and not the job I'm doing. I can be in IT and be very, very good in designing, I don't know, slides or designing whatever. And I can opt out appropriately, because it's easy to motivate people, but if they're not incentivized or this is not a priority for them anymore, you can be sure they're not going to deliver on the project and put all of their effort into it. So it was a rule to say you can opt out appropriately. This is a very important word. And finally, I can pitch any idea I have as a team member to the steering committee. If I have something, and it actually happened, because what this does, if you have a common purpose, and these simple rules, then you have trust and empowerment in your team. And this is the future of how we will work in project mode in the future. Or at least how my team appreciated, and they really loved it. They really loved having the power. We know where we're going. We know the North Star is this way. These are the rules that we have to follow. I feel empowered and accountable to deliver, and I'm having fun doing it. But you need an orchestrator or a coordinator or a coach, as I would like, in agile methodologies we call it a coach, to actually put this all together and coordinate so that it doesn't become a chaos. And this is actually very, very powerful. Now, with that, I want to end up on a more poetic note. So let's imagine a black canvas. The frame would be the simple rules. So this is the operating model under which a team can work. Inside that frame, you have the tree. The tree is power. This is how empowered your teams will become. The soil that the tree needs to grow is the trust. And the vector of minerals and water that the tree needs is the trust, vector of trust between the team members and the purpose and the common purpose you're serving. Water is what I like calling agility. It means staying connected to the people you're working, staying open-minded on how you can change stuff. To give you a small anecdote, we were doing this project in sprint mode, and we were at the second sprint, and I was like presenting to the team. Okay, so this is the idea of that I have for this feature to be developed, whatever. And one of the team members said, "Okay, I have an idea. I don't agree at all with what you're proposing we work on and do it this way. I have a completely different way. I've been talking about it with the other project member. Let me get out of the project for a week with my friend from the project team, and we'll come back next week and we'll present a counter proposition, and we'll see how things go and which one does the team agree on, because I wasn't the sole decision maker. I would take everybody's opinion into account and then take a decision. And a week later, in the beginning, I was like, okay, a team member is like making a coup d'état on me, trying to take leadership or whatever. But actually, a week later, and then even if you're open to it, it's not very easy to trust and to see your team members empowered, especially when you're new in the job or you're not sure you can deliver on the project. But actually, this was so powerful, and I was so proud that the team member felt this way and felt that the trust was strong enough to propose this, that they came a week later, proposed the counter proposition to the team, and 80% of what they proposed actually got voted in, and we mixed the two and got a greater product and greater final product. And it's not easy at first, but it really works when you have a common purpose and a framework that is strong enough. Then when the trust is built, really truly magic happens. Now, if any biologists or doctors or just anyone that studied photosynthesis in school is saying, okay, but aren't we missing like the sun, light, energy, all of that? So let me just say, and that might sound a bit cheesy, but to me the energy and the sun is you as a project manager in your team, because you are the energy that is connecting all of those things together, that is bringing all of those building blocks to create this environment that is codependent in the end to get into greater results and something stronger. And this really links, if you think about it, to what was said this morning by Bob Safiran on the project economy. He said it's about speed, flexibility, and learning. Speed, when you think about speed, if you have a frame under which you operate and then you give people trust and empowerment to do what they do and let them choose what they work on, things will go much faster. So you have much more speed in what you're developing. Flexibility, because as the whole thing is agile in a way, because you're open to change, you're open to changing things and modifying a bit your timeline and your planning, then it's very powerful, and you can always be flexible about what you're trying to achieve. And finally, the piece of learning is once you have trust in a team, people learn from each other, and knowledge is shared. And I was in a session a bit earlier before lunch that says knowledge sharing is the most powerful thing in the world. Shared knowledge that you have within your team or within your teams is really the biggest power and that has the biggest impact on your project at the end of the day. So with that, I'm going to open it up to questions. You have a list of all the sources and further readings. There's a great book from Donald Sull and Kathleen Eisenhardt that they wrote. It's called How to Thrive in a Complex World. It's really very powerful. Key takeaways, I hope you can see how to apply either the 4 simple rules I gave earlier or just the concept of simple rules to your day-to-day. And I'll be taking your questions now. These are my credentials if you want to get in contact. I'll be very happy. Thank you.